Today on In the Woodyard, we're going to talk about Kenny's logging career. Here it comes, right now. So yesterday, Kenny and I were driving, we were talking, he was telling me about I was asking him questions about all of his logging experience and when he started and all the jobs he had. And it was pretty interesting to me, and I know it will be for a lot of you, because he started out not in the logging industry, he's just cutting firewood, just like the rest of you. So we're going to talk about that right now. So the first time, when we were kids, we weren't really allowed to run a chainsaw. Our dad did that. We were the splitters, carriers, and stackers. That's all we did.
That was it. Never got to touch a saw.
Yeah, and Dad had a McCulloch 1010 and a John Shred and stuff like that. So Kenny's first experience cutting with a chainsaw was when he was out in Wyoming cutting firewood. So tell me what happened.
Well, didn't know from Shinola.
You didn't know what?
From Shinola.
No.
Didn't know squat.
There you go.
Didn't know squat. So we was in Gillette, Wyoming, actually is where I was at, and we would drive over to Black Hills, where by Sundance, Wyoming, and it was National Forest over there, and there was a bunch of, I don't know if it was like pine shoot beetle or whatever. There was a bunch of dead lodgepole pine. So we would drive over there with the crane truck. It was a 15-ton RO crane truck, if anybody knows what that is. It's got a big long flatbed on it. We put stake sides on it, and we would go over there. We'd run a single line down the hill because it was all hilly over there, and we would just cut the tree down and drag them up the hill and cut them to length, put them on a truck until we got a load, and we'd drive back to Gillette, and then we'd cut them up, and everybody in the crew would have a little firewood for, you know, campfires or whatever, because there was no other wood around Gillette.
So what'd you use for a chainsaw then?
We had some old piece of crap steel that nobody knew how to sharpen. I didn't know how to sharpen yet. It was like, oh, it was painful. Just like probably a lot of you guys when you start out. You don't know how to sharpen. You think you got a new chain. Well, that doesn't mean nothing. You still got to sharpen. So that was my first actual experience with a chainsaw. Cutting pine. If I would have had a saw as I had, the knowledge I have now, it would have been like nothing.
You got to start somewhere, and I'm guessing back then you just had the saw and some gas and oil. No chaps, no helmet, no earplugs, no gloves, no nothing. It was just brute force.
Nothing. So yeah, then I got out of the oil field, came back to Wisconsin, and started working for a paper company. And we all had chainsaws in the truck because there was always trees across the road, so you always had a saw. And then I was running bulldozer, and a lot of times we had to cut sticks out, you know, where it's jammed underneath the dozer or something up in the tracks. There was always some stupid reason. You always had to have a saw. So I got a little more experience there, learned how to sharpen a little bit, started cutting pulp part-time for some of our contractors.
So when you cut pulp, tell them what you did, because you didn't just go knock the trees down. You were cutting to length and flipping them into piles manually, right?
Yes, cutting pulp back in them days. You know, anything that was over, say, 8 inches, you didn't deal with. You know, I mean, you cut it down, but you measured it out, 100-inch stick with a measuring stick, like you guys saw in that one logging video. Same exact system, but we would drop 2 or 3 trees down, limb them out, and then you would bunch them by hand. You had bunching tongs. You would physically pile them by hand in piles for the skidder to come pick them up and take them out of the woods. Well, they call it a packer back or whatever. There's all different names, but that's how I started out. And a buddy of mine and myself, we would part-time weekend warrior it for several of our contractors that just needed some extra help, you know.
So I'm just guessing you didn't get much exercise then.
It was all bull work, all bull work. You worked until you couldn't even crawl at the end of the day. So, but it was decent money, you know. You worked hard. The harder you worked, it was piecework. We got paid for how much we got done. So the harder you worked, the more money you made. So that's kind of how my logging career started, and that was probably the first, 10 years of my logging. And then it just progressed there. It started picking up jobs of our own, and we'd get somebody to skid it for us, and it just kind of grew a little bit, you know. But it was all part-time on the side, weekends, days off, all my vacation time I would use that for. Holidays, that's what I would use my time for, was logging.
Which is kind of like what I started with firewood, just all my time off, because it just grew and grew and grew, and so every spare minute is cutting firewood. So That's like a lot of you probably, if you're starting a little firewood business, just put as much time as you can into it, because you gotta get your product ready to sell, and it doesn't sell itself and it doesn't dry itself. It takes time. So you gotta do the work. So after that, then what happened? After so then you lived up there. You were working for the paper company.
Yep. I worked for a paper company for 30, almost 33 years almost.
And what did you do? You were running the loaders.
The last 20 some years I worked in the yard, loading and unloading trucks and loading the train cars to send to the mills. We had several mills. We sent to Wisconsin Rapids, Buren, Wisconsin. We sent to Whiting, Wisconsin. We sent cars to Duluth, Minnesota. We sent cars to Escanaba, Michigan. We sent cars to Quinnipiac, Michigan. Where else? That's most of them, I guess.
So you had a yard where all the loggers would bring wood into you, and then you'd unload them, or they'd unload themselves, and then you would load the box cars and then go from there. So talk about like how much wood you had in the yard. How much wood do you have in there?
When we would fill a yard, the reason that we had the yard, and not the only yard, we had several yards. We had 1, 2, 3, we had like probably 5 yards. In Wisconsin, in the wintertime when the ground freezes, is a lot of times that's the only time you can get access to some of these swamps. You might have to cross a mile of swamp to get to the high ground.
Right. And that somebody asked me that just the other day, that they think it's the quiet time where there's not much logging going on in Wisconsin. Oh. It's actually the opposite. Everything freezes up, and that's when the logging happens.
The logging happens from now, like December, until breakup in March. Now it's balls to the walls from the next 3 months, because there's so much land that you can't access because of you can't build a road there unless you freeze down the swamp and drive over the swamp in the wintertime. So that's the only time you can get that wood. But the reason we have the yards is the mill only had room for 80,000 cords. That's all they could fill. That was at the big mill, our main mill. I mean, we sent to all these other mills, but most of the wood that went through the yard I worked at, the majority went to the Wisconsin Rapids mill. And they could only hold 80,000 cords. But
and how much do they go through in a day, just to give them perspective?
Okay, well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
80,000 cords would only last them for 40 days. They used 2,000 cords every day, 24/7. They were chewing that wood up like candy. So we would stockpile in all these short haul yards, I guess you call them. You know, a lot of the wood that was coming to the yard I worked in, a lot of that wood only came 50 miles. Well, it's another 100, almost 150 to the mill. They can't possibly truck it all down there in time to get it out of the woods. Plus, they only had room for 80,000 cords. So the yard I was in, I could hold like 25,000 cords on a good year, maybe 30 at the very, very most. And so once breakup came, say like March or April, and the roads are posted, they can't haul anything. The roads are all mush. Nobody's moving nothing unless you're on a state highway, which is getting to be a rare thing. So all these small yards like I worked in, we would feed the mill all spring. And he didn't really start logging any hardwood until June or July. And that's mostly what they used was hardwood.
So when you're loading trucks going down, you guys running 2 trips a day, so they load early in the morning, come back, load and run again. Yep. But then you're also loading box cars to go down. So like with your machine, how much would you move in a day?
Well, that varied. Like on a really busy day, and it got to be where we had 2 guys there. I mean, one guy could do it himself, but about killed you. But we would load like we could fit in 15 rail cars, which all held, say, just 30-ish, 32, 35 cords per car. So we'll do the math on that, times 15 or 16 if we could fit them in.
So probably like, what would that be, like 400 or 500 cords?
I don't know. Do the math. I can't. And then we would maybe load up to 40 truckloads going out with about 12 cords on per day too, on top of that. So 12 cords times 40 plus the, say, 34 times 16 cords. I can't do that in my head that quick, but
It's a lot of wood.
It's a lot of wood a day.
A lot of wood.
I mean, on a big week, I think we'd move 3,000 cords through that yard, in and out. Not in and out, but out. And a lot of times there was more than that coming in, faster than we could handle it. It was.
And at the same time, this is happening at the other yards. They're having wood come in and go out on trucks to the mill too, to feed the mill, right?
Yeah, there sometimes the mill would be receiving 100 cars of wood at one time, because the railroad would bring all them cars together in a collection point, and then they would take them to the big mill, and there'd be 100 rail cars there, and that's over 3,000 cords right there, just sitting in line.
But that's a day and a half's worth of wood.
Yes, that's only a day and a half's worth of wood.
That's amazing, the volume when you think about it.
It's only a day
and
and
it's
a
like
half.
that at every mill that makes paper. They go through a lot of woods. But the thing is, you know, the people that are the big tree huggers, they don't realize the trees grow back. every day they grow. So they get replanted or they just grow back naturally. So next question I have is, when you're working there, talk about your machine and what you could do with it, your reach you had with it, your height, how high you could stack, what kind of machine you had over the years, and you know how much you could do in a scoop, all that kind of stuff. That's interesting.
It was really a sweet machine. I got that machine new to, well, no, it was new. It wasn't new to me. It was a new machine.
And now, what did it cost?
At that time, I think they paid $360,000 for that machine.
And what do they go for now?
That machine now, well, they don't
Seven?
make that exact machine, but a comparable machine is over $700,000. They've doubled in price. So the machine weighed 80,000 pounds. I could reach from side to side, from one side to the other. The farthest I could reach was 95 feet. So it had a pretty good boom on it.
So that's not 95 on each side. That's 95 total. Total spread. Got it. Okay.
Total reach from one side to the other was 95 feet. That's a pretty good stretch, though. But you don't want to reach out that far all day, because that's a long stretch. You want to try to work in your sweet spot, which is about 10 to 15 feet away. So
when you're making these piles, see, the guys that come in with where they can't unload themselves, you got to unload them. And a lot of times you had guys that were back up because they're kind of like fighting for a position, because they want to get out, get unloaded, and go do another load. So you're constantly as fast as you can go unloading, right? And then there's other guys that can unload themselves, but then your machine can unload how fast?
I could unload a truckload of wood in about 6 minutes. You know, it was about 6 minutes.
Because your claw could hold a cord and a half, right?
Well, cord and a quarter, cord and a half. Yeah, depends on the wood, how gnarly it is. Because a lot of times your bucket's not closed, but the wood's crooked, so it's not closed, but you got a lot of wood in it. You didn't get away with that if you had real nice straight wood, because it'll dribble out the bottom like pencils. But yeah, and I could pile. I kept my piles. I tried to stay around 22 to 24 feet tall. I half pile as high as 32 feet, but boy, that gets dicey. You get 30 feet and you're looking up through the ceiling. It's like, man, this ain't fun. And it takes you a long time too, because you gotta go really careful. Like,
did you ever have a pile fall over on you?
Oh, we've had piles fall over. Yeah, it happens. That sucks.
That's not like just a pile of firewood falling over. This is a pile 30 feet high, and
it's 8 feet long, and it's all standing on end like pencils, and now you got to try to pick it up, and it's a mess. It doesn't happen very often, but I had one pile one time. I was down to the last pile. I seen it leaning. I'm thinking, I think I can go beat on that and straighten it out. Yeah, I straightened it out, and it went just like a big long snake. It went. There was 150 cords on the ground. I thought, oh my God, it took me a day and a half to clean it up. Well, you kind of work at it in between other jobs, you know. You got trucks coming in. You take care of trucks, number one, to get them in and out, because they always want to make their rounds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just what I did. And I just found out last week, my old machine, you guys seen on that video last winter when Chris videoed, had just got sold here a couple weeks ago. So I know a guy that bought it, and I know another guy that wants me to come work part-time for him. I might be running one of his machines here in the future.
We're thinking like maybe in a few weeks I might go up to Kenny's place again, and he's gonna for a week or two, something like that. run his own machine. So we're going to strap cameras on his machine. You guys can see him do some work in the big machine.
It's not my.
Well,
this is a different machine. I was in it the other day.
Same kind though.
Same, close, yes.
Yeah. So he's right away. He's saying, but he's not going to be as highly skilled as he used to be. So, but it still will be cool to see. So yeah, this is a machine that. It's got outriggers that go up and lifts the whole machine off the ground so you can go higher yet, and the cab, elevated cab goes up, it telescopes. So I mean, it's pretty darn cool. It's not something you see every day. So we're gonna do some filming of that. We'll put the camera in the cab so you can see his view. We'll strap a camera on the boom, and then I'll be filming off the side. So I'll probably try to have 3 cameras running on it. So it should be some pretty good video coming up. So that'll be neat. So tell me about your firewood career and how you started cutting wood for yourself, and then how that grew.
Well, I always heated with wood pretty much my whole life since
we were kids. Yeah.
Since I bought a house, my very first house I bought had a wood furnace, and every house I've ever had since has a wood furnace.
And up where you live, 90% of the people burn wood.
Well, I don't know about 90, but maybe 70% of the people burn wood.
That's a lot.
There's a lot of wood burners in my area, and there's a lot of wood in my area.
And they do that because number 1, they've got the wood, but number 2, they save money.
Yeah, depends on the price of gas and propane and natural gas. Sometimes it's actually cheaper, but it's not as warm.
Yeah.
Wood is a dry, warm heat, and I like a dry, warm heat.
Yeah, and you can have it as warm as you want. You don't have to worry about, oh, we got to keep the thermostat turned down to save energy. Put more wood in.
Exactly. Exactly. You come in from working outside all day, you're chilled, you're froze to the bone, you walk in the house, it's like, I want to be 80 degrees in here. I want to sit in the living room in my underwear. That feels good. So, and as you get older, I got a lot of customers that are older, they're getting in their 70s or maybe older. They like that hot, dry, warm heat.
Well, and they've always had it, and they can't physically do it anymore, right? That's where a lot of your customers,
They can't cut their own wood anymore, and they still want that heat, so they come to me, some of them.
So now on your job you used to have, they would have oversized stuff the mill couldn't take, or stuff that was rotten or crotchy, whatever it was, and you would have to throw it off to the side, so then your boss let you buy it cheap. So that's how you got a lot of wood.
Yes.
And you could load it right into a dump truck and haul it home.
Well, you had to pay a trucker usually.
Yeah.
I mean, because I knew all the truckers, and I helped them out, they'd help me out, so they'd always haul it cheap, and they were only hauling it a half mile, and I would load them in the yard with my machine, so all they had to do was drive a half mile and chuck it off in 10 minutes. So I always got it hauled cheap, and I always got to buy it cheap. And you guys seen the big rounds that that we deal with, but because of the price, it's worth the effort. And we get a lot of wood.
So now, before you started selling wood, you were cutting wood for yourself, Leroy, and somebody else. And so tell me how that all happened.
Well, it started out, it was me and Leroy, and then we got a little extra wood, and I had extra wood, and then we had a couple bad winters, and people go, geez, can you spare some wood? I'm like, yeah. And it's like, geez, maybe I should cut some extra wood. And then the next year was a little more extra wood.
And you've never advertised, people just word of mouth?
Nope, never advertised, just word of mouth. And because I'm dumb and I work hard, I just cut a lot of wood.
And the people found out real fast that you had good wood, because you had wood for heating, bigger wood, and you let it dry for a couple of years, and you took care of it, and you put it on pallet stacked, and you covered it to keep it dry, and you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, I got quite a few guys that's the reason they buy their wood from me. They could buy wood way closer to their house and they're getting it from me, but they know that my wood is covered and dried. But now, guy's not going to show up with it covered with 2 feet of snow and then throw it in his basement all wet. They
dry on the inside too. You're seasoning it full.
It's cured. It's cured minimum of a year, depending on how small I split it and all of that.
So now you used to sell mainly just bigger stuff because that's what you had for yourself. But now you're finding out there are people that like some smaller stuff too. Just because you're selling some campfire wood and you're selling some stuff in your stand and some stuff to people that don't necessarily heat with wood, but they're You're starting to get some fireplace people.
Yeah, I'm getting some people that got like a little stove, you know, what do you call it, with the glass in the front, the little stove, and they got a lot of them high efficient ones like that too.
Right.
So I'm getting more of those. So I'm cutting my wood down smaller now. You guys seen the blocks I'm cutting into little 4x4s. It's real beautiful wood and all that. And so I'm doing more and more of that, and we'll see where it goes.
And the one thing you have more of than I think I have. I mean, I have some, but you have a lot. Wood snobs.
Oh yeah. Where I'm at, the king of the world is hard maple. You know, jeepers, crepes. Oh, there's a piece of soft maple there. Yeah, big deal. You know, and I mean, most of my hard maple I try to keep separate, and I try to save it for the wood snobs. But I do have people that like oak, and I do have oak. And now I'm coming up on all these railroad ties I'm going to be going through. That's just a mix of everything. So yeah. It is what it is. So I might have to sell it cheaper. Maybe I'll end up giving it away. I don't know. I just keep cutting. We'll see what happens.
And right now you supply, you said, for like 5 different stoves you're filling.
Well, yeah, right now, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 homes and shops I heat right now. And then there's actually 2 or 3 more that buy, I'm gonna say, like 12 face cords, which would be 4 full cords, I guess, each a year. I got probably 4 or 5 of them people now. And then a lot of people that buy, you know, like 1 load is like what Chris would call a full cord. That's what I can haul on a car hauler. So I get a lot of those. Other than that, I don't know, it's just here and there.
So now I'm going to ask another question that pertains to firewood and your career in it that some guys aren't going to want to hear, but it's a good story as far as your evolution with chainsaws. Now, when you first started cutting, you were using stills back in the day. Back when was that, and what happened?
Well, we started out with stills, and then, I don't know, we kind of switched over to Huskies for some reason. I think it was mostly because the dealership that was local, was they had Husqvarnas, and we could get parts, and once you got a Husky, then you get another one, then you get another one. Well, geez, if you lose a screw or a part or smash a handle, you can steal off an old one, so you kind of just stay with the brand. And I've run both, but I'm kind of sticking with the Huskies now because that's what I got. So
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, there's the whole, you know, Ford Chevy fight, Husqvarna steel fight. They're both good. They both cut. I always say, as long as it's sharp and it runs, it's a good saw. That's what matters more than anything. But there's a lot of guys that they get their undies in a bundle over a brand. There's a lot of good saws. Even Echo's good. I've run some Echo's. They're nice saws, as long as they're sharp and they cut. Yeah, they're all good, so it doesn't matter. Anything else you want to talk about firewood?
Well, one thing I was going to say, I said on an earlier video, we're going to get into Colorado, so we're no longer in Kansas. I can say we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy.
Yeah.
Once again, we are in Colorado.
Yeah, we got about 4 hours to go till we're hitting New Mexico, and then we're going, this is a elk hunting trip, and I mentioned this earlier for those of you that haven't seen it. I got invited by one of the viewers on the channel. He manages a ranch out here in New Mexico, and it's a big ranch, and he invited me to go elk hunting, so can't turn that down. So I got a tag and we're going elk hunting, so it'll be an adventure. So that's it for today, folks. You know what to do. Hit the buttons, hit the like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Between now and tomorrow, when we come back, because maybe tomorrow we're going to be in New Mexico talking to a rancher, or maybe we'll be elk hunting. I don't know. It'll be fun though. Come on back. Between now and then, hit the buttons.
Good night, Irene.
There you go.